You might be on board with the idea of spending more time defending your work and explaining it, but what does that actually look like interaction by interaction? As a journalist, you definitely can't make everyone happy all the time, and you're bound to receive complaints and criticism about your work. The key is how you respond. Try to use humility and diplomacy, but don't be afraid to engage. Let's look at what that can look like. There are a lot of ways to hear what our audiences think of us. Maybe you take time to gather people together in person, like the Tennessean did, with specific communities they felt they needed to hear from. You almost certainly get emails and comments from your community. Depending on your role, you might get stopped out in public, even when you're off the clock, so people can tell you what they really think about your work. It's really important when deciding how to respond to think about both the tone you use when responding and the content, what exactly you hope to communicate. It's so important to breathe before you type or speak. Just take a moment to compose yourself and decide how to respond rather than reacting quickly. Do try to be human. Respond as a fellow human being, not as a corporate voice. Um, Try to drop the defensiveness if you can. Use some humility. Acknowledge that you're human and that you can mess up. And also speak in a way that respects um, your critics' right to criticize and to ask questions about what you're doing. See if you can acknowledge where people are coming from. I understand that this could be frustrating. Um, Thank you for getting in touch. Do also make sure that for the people in the newsroom who you specifically task with this sort of engagement, they're the right people. We like to say, choose the people who actually like people to be in charge of your engagement strategy. If you have colleagues who are especially, can come across as especially defensive or cranky, they might not be the best people to put in charge of responding to comments, for example. In terms of the content, um, do recognize that skepticism is valid and that you want to hear from your community, and see if you can begin by empathizing with where they're coming from and acknowledging that they have a valid reason to be asking the question or lodging the complaint. Do try to actually address what they're saying. You know how frustrating it is from a customer service perspective when you share a complaint and the response seems to sort of push it away without actually acknowledging the specifics of it. That's incredibly frustrating. And then list out, if you can, at least mentally, the actual facts that you would like to communicate. What is it you want people to know about how something happened, about how you make decisions, about your priorities, your ethics, that sort of thing. So here's an example from a newsroom we've worked with of how you could respond to an accusation, for example, about political coverage. We definitely hear how frustrating and biased political coverage can seem. And that's true, right? There's plenty of bias and irresponsibility in journalism overall. Your goal is not to defend all journalism, but to explain your work. Our goal is always to provide you with the information you need to make decisions. You can read about our goals and ethics here and link to where they can read more. We strive for fairness and accuracy in our reporting, and we want to know how we can do a better job. Please feel free to send me more specific feedback, and then if you can, list an email address or phone number. We like to compare the idea of hosting and moderating conversations, online conversations as journalists, to the idea of hosting an in-person party. Imagine if you were throwing a party and you stocked the bar, turned on the music, threw open the door, and then invited anyone in and hoped that they would be on their best behavior without any involvement from you. That's just not going to happen. Instead, if you're hosting a party, it's up to you to make sure people are following the rules and not ruining other people's time. We recommend that you try to compartmentalize the jerks. Remember that not everybody in your community is a jerk and that jerks are overrepresented in comment sections. Um, it is up to you to make sure that people can participate in conversations you're hosting without the jerks dominating it. So take a look at your comment policy, see if it empowers your staff to explain what conversations they hope to host and kick people out who are violating the rules. Then link to it and remind people that you're relying on it so that you can consistently moderate conversations. And then look for opportunities to engage. Think about what you want people to know about you and use comments as a way to say more about your decision making. Here's an example of where a news station noticed that people were asking questions about why they had used the term American Indian instead of Native American. One simple paragraph explanation from the reporter um, garnered a huge response from the audience. They really appreciated, I think, that the newsroom took time to explain it and had a thoughtful answer. You don't get automatic credit for the thoughtfulness that you put into decisions you make as a journalist. Sometimes you might hear from people about things they wish the newsroom would do differently. And moving a conversation to email or to a private conversation can be a great way to um, get beyond the sort of talking points and the tone of an online comments and learn more about them. In this case, WCPO got some really important contacts in a community and learned more about how a tricky issue like firearms could be better covered by the station, in the opinion of some community members. When it comes to politics, remember that people, when they don't understand your decisions, will fill in the gaps with some preconceived ideas and assumptions. So if people are asking you, why are you covering this race more than this race? Or why are you focusing on this candidate or this issue? It is worthwhile to take time to explain it so that their assumptions don't dominate long term perceptions. A newsletter can also be a really natural place to explain your decision making. When PolitiFact was hearing from readers that they were perceiving that PolitiFact was covering one national political convention differently than the other one, they listed those accusations or questions and addressed them head on and explained how they were working hard to be consistent and fair. And one final example, when a reporter in Jacksonville, Florida, was hearing accusations from the community about what was perceived as ethical violations, as an attempt to skew public perceptions of a story, in this case, how crowded beaches were during the coronavirus pandemic. The reporter took time on his Facebook page to show how photos were shot from different angles and address accusations directly that the choices were made to further an agenda. The key is to look for the right opportunities when it seems worthwhile to correct assumptions and invest in telling the story of your work, your credibility, and your ethics.